and welcome to another episode of The Mind to Lead. I believe we're on episode number 20 now, which is absolutely amazing. I'm absolutely loving these conversations with some incredible people, and today I know won't disappoint because I am lucky enough to be sat with Warrick Cramer. Hello Warrick, great to be sat having you on the podcast.
Hi, Georgie, and thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm really, really happy to be here. And no pressure also from your introduction as well.
Well, look, you will be able to introduce yourself far better than I will. I know a bit about you from our conversation when we were met at Startup Grind. But for those that don't know who you are, could you just give the audience a bit of an overview into who is Warrick, what have you been up to, and what's led you to this point in your life so far?
Sure. No, thank you, Georgie. Well, so it's Warrick Cramer, and I'm originally from Australia in Melbourne, and I basically have been an entrepreneur pretty much my entire career. I started off basically inventing a mobile payment solution, which is now used globally. Sold that company, and then I went on to do other businesses. And about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I decided to move into the corporate world. And one thing on my bucket list was that I'd never actually worked for anyone, so I didn't know what it was going to be like. And apart from, when you sort of do the part-time jobs when you're at school or what have you. And so professionally, I'd never worked for anyone. And I decided to take the massive leap of faith and go into the corporate world, and went over to Luxembourg and worked for Vodafone. And I worked in Vodafone, and where I went on to become one of the group CEO for all the innovation activity across the globe. Wow. And very, very exciting, and learnt a lot. And now I've got a perspective on both sides of the fence, from the startup world and entrepreneurship, right down to from the corporate side as well.
Amazing.
So there you go.
Well, what's really interesting about that, which I just want to sort of go into, is because a lot of people first go from working in corporate and then go and start their own businesses. So you did it the other way around, which is fascinating. So how did you go from working, from yourself, having the freedom and all that good stuff that people crave when they're working for corporates, to then stepping into a huge company, Vodafone? How did you deal with that? What was the process like for you?
Well, I think to put it in some context, I'd actually stopped working, so I was living in France at the time, sort of like on a long-term vacation, if you like, for a better term. And I got very bored, to be really honest with you, Georgie. And one of the things, I've always been a great believer that I've always tried to stretch myself. Always tried to put myself into a position where I'm actually very uncomfortable. Because for me personally, whenever I'm uncomfortable is when I actually grow the most. And I love that personal challenge. That's what sort of drives me. And, this opportunity came knocking on my door. Vodafone had sort of contacted me, and we sort of went backwards and forwards this conversation. And to be really transparent, I was a little bit nervous taking on the job because I've never, ever done it. And I didn't want to fail, go in there and, knowing that I don't have the control or the mechanisms to influence a change or make rapid changes as you do when you're running your own business. And so I took on the challenge, and I thought, it's one of those things I've never done in my life. And I think I need to grow from this experience irrespective of what the outcome would be. And that was one of my key drivers, really. To be honest, I thought I'd only last 12 months. That was my goal.
And then was it? How long did you work at Vodafone for? Was it
nearly 5 years?
5 years.
5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, you also just touched on something really interesting as well, because a lot of people, I believe that we have two choices. It's freedom or fear, and fear is what holds so many people back. So how did you overcome that? That limiting belief, that self-doubt that we all have when we start our own businesses, where we take a promotion, that inner voice that goes, we're not ready for this yet, or you're not going to be good at this. How did you overcome that and still step forward and go for the opportunity?
I think you always have to put things in perspective in life. And I always really think about, well, what's the worst that's going to really happen here? The worst that's going to happen is that they're going to fire me, get rid of me. And that's really about the worst that can happen here, right? And I also look at stuff around learning, because for me, I love to learn things. And so I thought, irrespective of what would happen and what the outcome would be, I'm going to learn something out of it, whether whatever it would be. I'll still walk away with something. And I think, with fear, yeah, it's natural to be scared. It's natural to have fear. I think we all do. But I think you also have to take that step backwards and have a look and say, well, you know, is it is it life threatening? No, it's just a job. So who cares? So what's the worst that could happen? And so that's why I always try to put things in perspective.
I love that, because I think what people have a tendency to do, and I've done this myself in my life, is jump to the worst case scenario all the time. And often we create stories in our mind that is so bad that the likelihood of that happening is so small. But it's crazy where our mind goes if we let it. So I think putting things into perspective is key. So you were with Vodafone for almost 5 years. What sort of made you then decide to leave that, and you came then back to Melbourne? Is that correct? After being there for 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came back for my family, really, because we were living in Luxembourg and we literally had no one there. And to be really honest, I loved working and living in Europe. I really, really enjoyed my time there. But when you I've got a teenage daughter. So anyone out there listening, don't need to say anything more than that.
Yeah.
And so we were just at a point in our life, and we had to make that call. So you always put your family first, and so that's what I did.
Yeah, amazing. So how have you sort of found going back from Europe lifestyle to Australia is a little bit, different? I mean, I'm from the UK, and, I can certainly sort of say I prefer the lifestyle in Australia, hence why I've been here for 10 years now. But how was it? Was it like making that transition? Did you give yourself some grace period? Did you jump straight back into work? How sort of have you found the process from sort of moving from Europe back to Australia?
It's been an interesting one. I've been fortunate that I've, been doing bits and pieces, and I've got the choice to be able to do what I like. So I've sort of been very fortunate on that front. But I think, being Australian and sort of having grown up here and then lived overseas, worked overseas, and spent a lot of time over there, and sort of in a global role, coming back to Australia, there's a lot of opportunities here, absolutely, and that's why turned. It's a great place for families and for kids, education wise, etc. But from a business perspective, there are also a lot of shortcomings as a country and as a nation that we have in Australia, and some of it is very cultural. I found you have two sort of sides of the fence here. You've got organisations that are very nationalistic, so we'll only look at Australian experience, Australian companies. We don't need to work outside, but only in Australia. And then you've got other organisations that really welcome the global experience, want to really take their businesses to the next level and take it outside of Australia. So that's been my personal experience since coming back. I've also found I spend a lot of time, as you know, Georgie, with a lot of startups, and I do a lot of mentoring work. I currently sit on a board in Silicon Valley with VC up in the valley there. And the other thing that's really shocked me a little bit was that a lot of the startups here don't really know their market very well. They don't. They're not really doing the research to see what's actually out there, very similar. So if there is a similar product or service to theirs, and I've had many of them come to me and say, guys, I've seen this like in 5 other countries around the world, further developed. So didn't you just get onto Google and do a search before you sort of embarked on this journey? So there's been a few. From that perspective, I think the opportunities are there to grow the business. I think it's just a cultural shift and a mindset shift that really needs to take place here. And that's sort of just a personal view that I've had since I've come back, an observation I've made.
No, that's really interesting. And I can imagine, that whole mentorship is so well, you must have people banging down your door right now with everything that's going on. And obviously we are living through one of the, no time in history has been, well, we've not lived through anything like this before. This pandemic is really highlighting, I think, a lot of, issues in businesses. It's highlighting a lot of flaws in people's character. It's been a very, very interesting time. So how, right, I mean, where do we start? So, I mean, when all this kicked off, what advice were you sort of giving to the startups that you were mentoring when this began to kick off?
I've been doing startups and I've been doing some consulting work for a few companies as well.
Mm.
And I've sort of said to a lot of the CEOs and owners and founders, use this opportunity to stop and think and do the things that you've never had the opportunity to do in your business. And go back to the drawing board and look at everything, put a question mark on everything, and know that everything is not going to be the same again. How you interact with your customers will be very, very different in the future moving forward. And the processes that you had beforehand will not work now. And, just the whole customer journey aspect. So I sort of said to them, you can either use this time to say, oh, well, it's all doom and gloom and, we can't do anything, or you can use this time to be productive and say, okay, well, now let's go to the business. Let me think. Let me take a step back. I can't do anything if everything's closed around me and everything's come to a halt. But what I can do is say, okay, well, start working on that strategy, start working on that 3 or 5 year plan, start really questioning, start connecting with other people and having the conversation. So that's sort of the advice I've been giving people.
Mm-hmm. I think as well, I would completely second with you there, because I know I've got a recruitment business and I've also launched an online coaching program, which is more around sort of fitness, health and mindset. And one of the biggest things that I keep getting my clients keep saying to me is like, I just can't, the fear is just holding me back, and what if this and what if that, and they're making I guess excuses. They are playing the victim. It's very hard, I think, in the current situation for people to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So, if you have somebody sat there listening to this right now, they are finding it really hard to find the motivation to innovate their business at this time. Where should they start? Like, what kind of questions should they be asking themselves at this time to seek some clarity, to help them see a future that perhaps they can't quite see right now?
It's a really, really good question. I would sort of start with, before we get to the question side, I would start around the people that they're surrounding themselves with.
I love that.
And one thing I've always tried to do is never be the smartest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be the dumbest person in the room, and I want to always learn from people. I want people to always challenge me, and I really enjoy that. And I think that's number one. Before you start, you might be down, etc. There's no point being around people that are also down, because you're just going to get dragged down further. So I think that's first and foremost. I think around the question side of it is really, and it comes down to a bit of vulnerability, being mature enough to be a little bit, feel that vulnerability and be able to talk to the people around you and say, hey guys, I'm finding it really hard, and letting people look through into your business. And that sort of, that, I suppose, that guidance, but also challenging you as well around, well, why are you doing it that way? Or how come you haven't managed this in this particular way? And getting those people to ask those questions for you. And hopefully that will stimulate some really, really good, strong discussion around, well, do I really need this particular person doing this particular role? And what is it? And just recently, as I said, in the last week, I've been doing it for a company. And one of the things was that I said to the CEO was, let's go and look at everyone's job description. And let's just forget about the people for the moment. Let's see what we actually need. We worked on a sort of a 5-year strategy plan, and we sort of did the roadmap and said, okay, well, in order for us to get there, what skills do you actually need in the business to achieve that goal? And then we started listing it down, and very quickly we realized that he's actually got a few things missing in terms of skill set. And then we looked at it and we said, well, you've morphed roles in because people have been there, not necessarily sort of, I suppose, looked at the skill set required to take you to that next stage. So I think, I'm sorry for a long-winded answer there,
No, no,
Georgie, but
yeah.
I think, the so going back to the original question was around, what questions can you ask
Mm,
people? I think it comes down to the people that you're sort of
mm,
associating with, and making sure that you are being challenged always, because the
mm,
questions will follow
mhm,
automatically with the right people around you.
mhm. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there's that old famous saying that, you're the average of the five people that you hang around with. And, I completely agree with that. I think, I am always trying to surround myself with people who are positive, who have an optimistic way of looking at life, and I think that's really, really important. And, I think that, I mean, I'm reading a lot online of like how to look after your mental health at this point. It's like, stay connected. Yes, stay connected, but make sure you're staying connected to the right people, because if you're speaking to people who are also fearful and moaning about everything and playing victims, that's going to rub off on you, and that's not going to do much for your mental well-being. So you touched on something as well that I want to just dive deeper. You said about sort of the skills that are going to be needed. So I'd love to get your view and opinion. Like, where do you see, especially like in the, I guess, the digital space, what sort of skills do you think will emerge? What sort of, job roles do you think people will be looking for after all of this? What skills are going to be in demand?
Yeah, I think the traditional businesses that were once around, the bricks and mortar businesses, I think they'll still be there, but in
Yeah.
terms of how they do, it's around distribution, and around
Mm,
their distribution modeling and how they reach their customers will be very, very different.
mm,
Now, everyone's talked about, digital transformation and that lovely buzzword that's floating around, which everyone loves to talk about. But for me, it's quite interesting, because I was talking to someone in the health industry just recently, and they were talking about digital transformation. And it was really interesting to listen to them, because their view of digital transformation was, oh, we're on blue jeans now, we're using Zoom. And so therefore, we're doing telehealth, and that's a huge leap forward. And I go, that's not digital transformation. You're moving to the 21st century. Uh, so, so it's really interesting. So I think the skills that are going to come out will be around, I think marketing will be, from an online perspective, in terms of how you reach customers, exactly what you're doing, Georgie, around podcasts and videos,
mm,
and reaching that sort of whole informational stuff, having those sort of two-way type of conversations with customers at the core. That those skills will definitely be required by organisations. I think looking from a distribution point of view, how you're going to start to distribute your product or your service more efficiently, and thinking about markets outside of Australia as
mm,
well. I think there's a few different skills that are going to come out of it. I think also, if you think about, I think just general digital competencies really, and I've seen a bit of a gap here when I've come to Australia, in terms of the rest of the world. So there has definitely been a gap,
mm,
and in terms of just how we're automating the AI capabilities, the conversations around, for example, quantum computing, and sort of deeper technologies. I'm not sort of hearing those sort of conversations in my, people are touching on it, but in terms of uh, deep, talented sort of skill set of people that know the sort of type of digital sort of skill set, I suppose. I just don't see them here at the moment.
mm. Yeah, I love that. And I would completely agree with you. I think marketing, especially digital marketing, is going to be such a big skill set. And, I just think ultimately it's all branding, isn't it? Like, you want to get your name out there, your brand out there. And there's just, we live in such an incredible time in history where, it doesn't take much to start a podcast. You can launch a business online within a couple of weeks. You can build a website. There's WordPress, there's, Wix, there's Squarespace. Like, you can literally start any business tomorrow if you wanted. You've just got to have the discipline, the motivation, and the mindset to start, and obviously the passion and purpose for the product or service that you want to offer. And I just think that's exciting, right? And, but there is a skill to marketing, and I am still figuring it out myself. But it's sales and marketing. I think, people don't necessarily want to hear that, but it's true. Like, you could have the best product in the world, but if you don't know how to get it out there, you're not going to be successful, right?
Yep, absolutely. And I think it's that combination. What's really highlighted with this pandemic is that, everyone went to online, but then there's still a need to have that physical contact as well.
Yes.
And it's like having that balance. You can't, it's not having, one way or the other way. I think it's just having that blended approach, which is right. And, you look at the digital sort of whole transformational piece around organizations, the skill set that's in there. You need to ask a question: are people there protecting their jobs? Or are they really trying to push the organization, the people in the organization, to learn new skills, to sort of push the business forward? And and I think it takes a lot of honesty from a leadership point of view to be able to ask those questions. Because ideally, you don't want to get rid of anyone. But what you want to do is stimulate people to want to go out there and grow and better themselves, and give them the platform to be able to do it.
Yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
everyone's got some sort of contact in terms of, digital, social media, or what have you. So it's really, how do we hone those skills as an organization together?
Absolutely. And in terms of that whole leadership piece, I mean, now more than ever, I think everyone needs to be a leader. I think it's time for everyone to step up and, not add to the chaos. Let's keep calm. Let's, stay focused. But if you are somebody right now who is, maybe you're a leader of a team in a corporate, or maybe you own a business and you've got a team of employees, what should any leader be doing right now to not only look after themselves, but look after their team and the people in their care?
It's a really, really good question, because I think, leaders have a really big responsibility with this. And I thought first would start with have a purpose and a clear vision. Because if you don't have purpose and your clear vision, then everything gets lost in it. And so therefore, then you get people feeling insecure. They don't know what if their job's going to be there tomorrow. What am I coming into work for? What am I working for? Who? And all these sort of questions to arise. So I think as a leadership, first, have purpose and clear vision. Secondly, leave your ego behind, because that's really, really important. And, try to build a culture where you foster openness and honesty with your teams. Because that's what's really important. You want people to feel comfortable enough to come up and say, Georgie, you know what, that was rubbish. I didn't believe what you were saying and I didn't like it. And you don't take offense to it. And you sort of say, well, but why? And you start to delve deeper and deeper and deeper. And you know what? They might give you a different perspective that you'd never, ever thought before. And I think, so from a leadership point of view, there's a lot of benefit for leaders to be able to morph also, and to change into something and to become more collective. And I suppose for me, it's being a servant. Leadership is you're a servant to others, and your job is to help others.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love what you just said then as well. Leave your ego behind. I think that is just so powerful. And I think as well, like, one thing that I am definitely having with the team at the moment is a lot of empathy. I think it's probably now isn't the time to be like, setting some crazy KPIs and, expecting people to be sat at their desk 9 till 5. Like, let's all just take a breath. This is new territory for everyone. People are at home trying to look after their children. They're trying to homeschool them. They're trying to do all these things. On top of that, they're trying to do their 9 to 5 day job, and I think it's very, very, be very aware of the expectations you put onto people, because people automatically put high expectations on themselves already. So I'd love to get your thoughts on empathy, and how leaders you can be developing that, and maybe sort of not forcing KPIs too much on people at the moment, but also understanding that they're under pressure as well. So where's that balance? Like, how can leaders be more empathetic, but at the same time, get the job done, basically?
I think I've always, and this is, I think, goes back to my core belief in me as a person, my DNA. I think before all of this pandemic happened, how I've always managed my teams, I had teams in 26, 27 countries globally. And, my first line managers, what I used to do with them was, you can imagine I've come into a whole corporate environment, right? And very structured, and there's a policy and a procedure for absolutely everything. And I hate that. And so what I used to do was, with my team meetings, I used to sort of say to my team, okay, guys, we're going to have our team meeting, and I'd give them a random address at a cafe or a bar, right? And we'd go to this cafe or bar and we'd have our team meeting in there. And they all found this absolutely weird, right? And they thought I was just strange. But inadvertently, what I was trying to do was I was trying to pull them out of their everyday sort of routine, if you like, and put them into an environment which is foreign to them. And I found when I was sort of, they were a lot more relaxed. And as a result of that relax, we were able to have more honest and open conversations as to what was going on. Now, from that, you would hear all the problems that they have in their life as well. And it is a fine balance, but because we've all got sort of, our own sort of things happening in our personal lives. But it also gave everyone the idea where, the insights into, well, this person couldn't deliver on this or couldn't do this because all this other stuff was happening. And inadvertently, you're sort of starting to get people to have a bit of empathy for each other, right? Because at the end of the day, for me personally, from my leadership style, I don't mind when things happen. I've got a deadline and an end date, and I have to make sure that we deliver on that particular date. How we get there, I don't mind. Okay, and it's not about micromanaging people, because I think when you get into that sort of micromanagement, no one really likes it. So I think from having that empathy for people, and I think just being aware that things are happening in people's lives all the time, Georgia, and I think Georgie, sorry, and I think for me, I think it's just making sure that your teams really are in sync with each other.
I completely agree. And touching on the current situation now, because I think that there is going to be a lot of change in the future of work and, what happens next from here. So, obviously companies have been forced. We're all working from home now. I think that's I think people are going to really start to question, well, why do I have to be in the office at 9 o'clock? Why do I have to be there till 5? Why do I have to have my lunch break at 12 o'clock? I'd love to get your thoughts and view on how you think this will impact the future of work and, what companies can do to maybe innovate and think about that as well.
Well, I'll go back to sort of my corporate stint. And when I started, we see people in the office till like 8 hours, 10 hours, 11 hours, sometimes 12 hours a day. There's no in the world they're being productive.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. And so when sort of my team started to come together, and I sort of, I used to say to my teams, look, guys, if I get 4 to 5 hours of productivity out of you a day, I'm okay with that. And if you spend the rest of the 3 hours, I just want you to build relationships. Do your stakeholder management, because at the end of the day, that is really what gets things done in a corporate environment. Is your stakeholders and the relationships that you build internally and externally. And I used to get upset, to be really honest with you, Georgie, if I used to see someone at their desk for 8 to 10 hours, because I used to say, guys, it's either you're doing something wrong or you're struggling with something, and let me come and help you. Because, it just doesn't make sense for me for you to be able to do all day and night. So 4 to 5 hours out of the day, and then you give people the flexibilities to do what they need to do.
I completely agree. And I have always fought back because I just completely disagree with the whole Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I mean, I've always had this entrepreneurial tendency in me. So I've always was destined to own my own business because I hated it. I hated having to be at somewhere at a certain time and leave. Half the time I would come in, I'd be so productive. Like you said, for 4 hours, I'd do 4 hours of solid work. And then by like 4 o'clock, I was done. And instead of me walking up, being an adult and going, see you, I've done a good day's work, I felt like I had to sit there for another hour and look busy. And I just think there's just this whole culture in the workforce at the moment who, probably spend half their day on social media, checking the news, when actually if they were just said, right, get your work done, I can guarantee you they get the best work done in a few hours, probably better than what they would in the whole 8-hour working day. And we'd probably have an even more productive workforce. So I think 4 hours, 5 hours tops in a working day is enough, personally.
I agree. I mean, look, the other hours, it should be, building those relationships and having stakeholder management. Find out what else is within the organisation, what's trending. Running all the innovation. One of the things that I did was when we set up our offices and I started building this new office, you're going to laugh, but I actually built a bar with the coffee machine, not alcohol bar. Of course.
Oh, damn. I want to come work for you.
Huge coffee machine and did it like a bar and a lounge. And that was I got rid of our reception area and I converted it into a meeting space. And where we had sort of really cool chairs and tables and a cafe lounge, and I had music playing. And I used to find the staff used to come in the morning, have coffees. Everyone else in the building used to want to come up and have coffees. And then the conversations that used to come out of that, it was just amazing, because all of a sudden someone go, oh, you know what, I'm doing this deal and I've got, I'm looking for this, or, this is happening at the moment and this is happening over in Germany, or this is happening in the UK, or whatever it might be. And that rich dialogue, my teams would have never, ever been privy to if we'd gone down the traditional route.
100%.
And so, and so a lot of the time they would just sit there and, it was, as I said, I tried to create that cafe sort of environment rather than just having a nice big reception desk, which I thought was a waste of space.
Completely agree. I completely agree. Well, that sounds like a beautiful culture that I would probably have enjoyed working in if I was still in the corporate space. But I'd actually love to pick your brain about the whole productivity. Do you have anything that you do religiously that you find works for you, in terms of when you're managing all those people, you're the CEO of Vodafone? I mean, that's huge. So what did you do every day to make sure that you maximize your time and maintained, you're a family man, you've got a beautiful family to think about as well. So how did you find that quote unquote balance and sort of keep productive every day?
I'd set myself goals, daily goals. So I'd sort of have my list of all the things that I would have to achieve. In the morning, my ritual was really simple. And I still do it now, actually. I read all the news from all around the world. So from every single continent, I get on there and read what's going around the world, not only in Australia, but globally, because I like to know what's moving the markets, etc. So that's sort of the first thing I do. And then I'd have my list of all the things that I needed to do, but I'd also build in time always for my team. I'd love to just walk around, walk the floors, talk to people, have coffees with them or what have you. So that's sort of, and then I'd finish when I finished, and then I'd go home and be with the family. So I think that's how I got through my day.
Yeah, and look, I just think that we have kind of lived in the culture, and I hope this does change, where the entrepreneur and the startup world is hustle, 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 15-hour days, all of that. You don't sleep, you work till midnight, you get up at 5, and what you're obviously in it more than I am at the moment. What's that doing for our health and our well-being?
It's extremely unhealthy, and even with VC I'm working with in Silicon Valley at the moment, and even with Vodafone, when I was sort of seeing a lot of the startups, when I used to find founders like that or CEOs like that, we wouldn't deal with them,
right? Because
it was such a high risk for burnout, mental health, or whatever, and also we would know that their structure in terms of how they've built their business is not sustainable. So we just walk away. So really the advice I can give to founders and CEOs is make yourself obsolete from day one.
Love it.
So build your business and structure so you don't need to be there. And so therefore having those processes, having the people around with the right skills, and eventually, you should not be part of the business, essentially.
I mean,
not literally.
Yeah, but I agree. It's becoming an owner, not an operator, and I think that's the thing. It's making yourself redundant. And there's a lot of, and look, I used to be one of them. I used to be a control freak completely. And I've had to learn to loosen off the reins and let go and, let my team deal with the clients and, and just then get on with more of the branding, the growth, the innovation, the 5-year plan. And I've got more time to do that now, which is amazing. But yeah, I think that it's so easy to get caught up in that spiral of I've got to outwork, I've got to out hustle all these other businesses. And actually, I love your approach to say I wouldn't touch people that have that attitude, because it's not sustainable. So everyone who's listening to this now, who is working 12, 14, 15-hour days, just, it isn't sustainable. And we are seeing a culture now of burnout. And even now, I read an article earlier today about how burnout now is happening through this pandemic, because people aren't switching off, they're not setting boundaries of work. So, what advice would you give from people who are working from home right now and are feeling burnt out and overwhelmed with all the things they're trying to get done? How would you go about try to deal with that?
Well, I think, at the end of the day, it comes down to the culture of the organization. But personally, I think, aiming for that perfection, because that's what people try to do and try to be perfect at absolutely everything. And let's outshine everyone else and let's show the organization how, they can't live without me, etc. I think that attitude has to be, you have to drop that attitude and you have to be comfortable to know that you're doing the very best you can and know as a discipline that at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever it is, you stop. You have to switch off because you need to refresh your brain. I go for a walk every day. I'm out on the beach every single day, and it's a time for me to reflect.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's really and I suppose fear, comes back to it right at the beginning of this, right? When we talked about it's overcoming that fear and those anxieties that you might feel that the business is going to get rid of me if I don't. If I'm not on call at 8 p.m. at night or 9 p.m. at night, I don't think anyone would expect that.
No, I totally agree. And if you want a good book to read, I recently read a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. I mean, it's
crazy.
Yeah, it's an intense read, but one of the regrets was I wish I didn't work so hard.
Yes.
I wish I had more balance. I wish I had more time with my family. And I think, now is not the time to be, throwing yourself into your work. Now is the time. Like everyone's always complained about, I wish I had more time for this, this, and this. Well, that's the gift we've been given throughout this pandemic. And I think it's spending it wisely.
Yeah, Georgie, it's really funny you mentioned that book because I actually did a talk on this, and I use that as a reference in my talk.
Amazing.
In Europe, and it was quite funny because I said in my talk around that was that we've got all this technology around us and it's actually meant to free us, but instead it's doing the total opposite of that, right? And we're living our lives by social media in terms of how it becomes a driver in terms of how we feel, which is wrong. How many likes I get means whether I'm going to have a good day or bad day, and so you just need to stop and take a perspective and put life in perspective and not be a slave to technology.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so I think it's a great book. If anyone hasn't read it, it's very confusing, but it's a fantastic book.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? And that actually, it's regret that scares me the most. It's like, okay, I fear that, but do you know what I fear more? Regret. Getting to the end of my life and thinking, I wish I'd gone for that. I wish I'd done that. And I think that, that's why I find fear such an interesting topic, because I do think it paralyzes people to go for their dreams, to take that first step, to have the confidence and courage to take the promotion and, or whatever it may be. So I think that, it's definitely a very powerful book, but that was one of the lessons in it that really stood out for me because, I can be a bit of a workaholic. It's something I've really had to work on. And, I think a lot of people who are burning out and overworking, they should definitely take that life lesson and pause and breathe and just, remember that life is also for living. It's to be enjoyed. It's, don't tie your whole identity into your work, like spend this time and, reconnect with your children, reconnect with your spouse, stay in contact with your friends. I think it's, for those people that are looking for it, this is a real good opportunity to really audit our lives and get clear on what we want. So, I'm so pleased you've read that book as well. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to I suppose also those relationships that I was referring to before, building those relationships, because
Correct.
Really what's important at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you can get another job, you can get another business, you can start another company. It doesn't really matter, but those relationships is what really matters at the end of the day.
Correct. Now let's I'd just love to before we wrap up the conversation. You mentioned before we jumped on that you've been, in a lot of boards and talking about what's coming next and, what what in your view, in your opinion, what do you think is next for Australia, and the people here, and what sort of trends are you seeing and, what is going to happen after all of this, I guess, in your mind?
It's a really difficult question to answer, but I think, once again, I think an observation, and this is purely my own sort of opinion and observation, is that the opportunities exist for Australian businesses, Australian startups, what have you. It's whether they want to look outside. And I think really that's the opportunity, whether they want to be in the driver's seat or the passenger seat. I think from a government point of view, I think it's really going to force governments in every state and even nationally to really rethink. You've got all these sort of organisations, government organisations that help companies to go outside Australia, but I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's they're doing enough in terms of doing those soft landings. So when you get to another country, so for example, George, if I've got a company and I want to expand my business and go into the US, well, they'll get me there, but they won't set me up there. They won't sort of help with that, all that sort of soft stuff, like how do I going to get my kids into school, or how do I go and get a driver's license, and all that sort of very soft sort of stuff that's needed and drives people's decisions. So I think the government really assisting with that a lot more and becoming a lot more proactive in that front. I think there's an opportunity there to do a lot more. I think secondly, if I look and I think there's an opportunity for companies to really, I suppose, revisit the skill sets that are really required and really to look at their strategies and their overall, I suppose, governance models, even like looking at some of the boards that I've been looking at in Australia. I mean, people on the boards for 10, 20 years. I mean, it's crazy. It should be refreshed every 7 years or 10 years as part of that sort of governance. And you can't have someone on a board for 20 years. That just doesn't make sense to me. So I think, just refreshing those sort of skills and not losing, you don't lose it, you just have to evolve and develop. So I think that's one. And I think benchmarking, looking at benchmarking your organization against people out there globally, not just in Australia. We have a tendency to benchmark ourselves locally, so what's happening in Queensland with that company that's very similar to me, or what's happening in Western Australia. Oh, wow, all that sort of stuff. That's wrong. You need to go outside Australia and benchmark yourself. So I think, I'm hoping I'm answering your question here because I'm sort of a tendency to wander here, but mine's going 100 miles an hour. But I think the opportunities were there. As I said, the fear that I have is that businesses will become more nationalistic, and so therefore the pandemic will drive fear, and as a result, they won't want to look outside, and that's probably the scary part for me, because I think now is the opportunity to really just flex your muscles and just get out there and grow.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, I think that's it, isn't it? I think we said at the start, there's so many opportunities available to people that go and look for it and go and seek it. And I think, that you're so right, because the tendency now would be to think, this pandemic, I've got to stick to my country, all the borders are shut, let's just lock down, let's just focus on my business in Australia. And, but actually there's such a big opportunity now, because I think what this has done is actually made us realize how connected we are. Like a virus that starts in China can spread to the whole world. Like that to me just says we are so connected, and that we can actually help one another at this time. And if we, it's how we choose to approach things. But I think the worst thing you could do right now would just be to lock yourself down and just focus on your little community and your little in Australia. Let's think bigger. Let's go big. Let's think how we can take our business globally and help and impact the world.
I mean, look, I said a lot of startups always think about how you're going to scale your business, and you have to think globally from day one, and you have to use your local market as a way of just testing. But at the end of the day, get your systems and processes bedded down for growth for the future. Because if you don't think like from day one, and you don't think about your exit strategy from day one, you're going to struggle as the business grows.
Yeah, absolutely. So much amazing advice and takeaways. Like it's gonna be challenging. I'm doing my Fab Five after this. I'm like, where do I cut this down in 5 minutes? I have to rewatch the whole thing and just pick out my top 5. But look, I guess your parting words of wisdom, Warrick, what's the one thing that you would say to people, the one thing that you would say that everyone should be doing right now during this time? What would that be to stay focused, positive, and in that sort of really good headspace?
Yeah, I think don't be reactive and don't overreact. I think it's just you have to slow down, have a look, assess the situation, do your scenario plannings, and then make a decision. Don't jump hastily forward because that's what people have a tendency to do. They're going to panic mode and they think, oh my gosh, I have to do this. Or no, stop. Take a step back. Talk to others. Do your scenario planning. Think about the real impacts that are going to be around, and really they might not be there. You might be conjuring a lot of things in your mind or in your head. So I think that's what I would sort of say to them. And then really thinking about, and don't let your ego drive decisions. Who cares what other people think? Just take a step back and make the right decision for you, your family, and the business. And that's what you need to do, and I think, during these times.
Yeah, amazing. I think we just got the title for the podcast, Don't Let Your Ego Drive Your Decisions. So that's what it's going to be called. Warrick, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time. And I just know everyone's going to get so many incredible takeaways from that. So thank you so much again. Just for those people that want to reach out to you after this, where can people go to find you?
Look, I'm on LinkedIn, so just look me up on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active on that. So please feel free to connect, and I'll be more than happy to answer it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Yeah, thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Mind to Lead podcast. I really hope you got some great takeaways and key learnings from this episode. To help us spread the message, please give us a rating and leave us a review. We love reading your thoughts and your insights and your learnings. And look, reach out to me. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Georgie Hubbard. Reach out to me on Instagram. I'm Georgie L. Hubbard. Let's connect. I hope you have an incredible day, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon.